Hello, everyone, and hope that you're doing great today. Now, today we're looking at a CSEC Human and Social Biology paper. This is my first review of a Human and Social Biology paper. This is from January 2019, and it is a paper 2. All right, we're going to run through this as quickly as we possibly can, but please remember before you start any CSEC examination, you should read through the instructions carefully, and if you should have any questions or queries, please clarify those with the examiner before you begin the examination. All right, that being said, let us jump into section A. And section A, you should answer all the questions. And so the statement here is that figure 1 shows the image of an upper limb. The image shows a skeleton muscle labeled A, which forms one of a pair of antagonistic muscles. And I try to label everything as possible right here. And so we have the tendon, which connects a muscle to a bone. We have muscle A, which is the biceps. And opposing that muscle, we have the triceps at the back. All right, we have the radius, we have the ulna, and again, we have tendon that connects muscle to bone. We have the humerus, all right, and we have the scapula, which is also called the shoulder blade. All right, so for the first question of section A, so part A1 is to identify the muscle labeled A, and we identify that as the biceps, and it's to name the muscle that is antagonistic to the muscle named in A1, and that will be the triceps. All right, and so let's go to part B. It's a contraction and relaxation of the skeleton muscles in figure 1 are necessary for locomotion, which is movement. It's to explain how these muscles work together to cause movement of the forearm. And so to make a note that they work oppositely, which is also called antagonistically, when the biceps relax, the tricep will contract, and vice versa. And so just to make a note right here that flexing the arm, which means to raise the arm or to kind of make a muscle, And so by doing that, the biceps will contract while the triceps relax. And if you want to extend the arm, which is also straightening the arm, then what will happen here is that the bicep has to relax, which get longer, while the triceps contract, which means to get shorter. All right, so part 2 of B is a state 2 reasons why locomotion is important to humans, and there are many reasons. One is to obtain food, especially if you're hunting. Matter of fact, even to cook your food, you have to have some form of movement. All right, even eating the food. All right, to manufacture food, for example, planting food or even producing food in a factory, whatever you have to do, there's some form of movement that you have to do right there. Reproduction, of course, escaping danger, making shelter, making a house or habitat, care for offspring as well. And there are much more that you can also list. All right, but these are some of the basic ones. All right, so let's go to part C. It's a malaria and dengue are 2 diseases that are prevalent throughout the Caribbean. Table 1 and Table 2 show the incidence of the diseases in 2 Caribbean islands, specifically X and Y, during the period of 1990 and 1994. All right, so notice here, Table 1 shows the number of cases of dengue fever in the Caribbean island X between 1990 and 1994. And so this is the chart with the data. And then Table 2 now is the number of cases of malaria in Caribbean island Y between 1990 and 1994. All right, and so if you look at the data carefully now, what they're going to ask us to do here is that on the grid provided on page 7, plot a bar graph to show the number of dengue cases and malaria cases in each year shown in the Table 1 and Table 2. All right, so what we did right here is just to go through the numbers and kind of plot them on the graph. So again, you can go back and look at the numbers, pause, and then you write them down, and then you see why we have our graph here. All right, there's one thing that I miss out right here is always try to write a title for your graph. All right, so please make sure you put that in, a title, and you can just see the graph showing the number of cases between dengue and malaria between the year 1990 to 1994. All right, so please ensure to write a title. Please don't forget that. All right, and so on the y-axis, you have the number of cases. On the x-axis, we have the years. And very important to note, you must use a proper scale to make your graph at least half of the page. That is very important. All right, and the access to a bar graph. So this will be our bar graph. Again, you can just go through it and see if you get similar result based on what I have here. All right, so my scale will be for every major line, it will be 10, all right, and so on. All right, so please just observe the graph again as best as you possibly can, and you should get a pattern looking like this. All right, and so part 2 is which island had the greater number of cases of diseases during the period of 1990 to 1994. And if you add all the cases, you realize that island X will have the greater number of cases for that entire period. All right, so just right here, the asking to add up all the numbers, really. All right, and part 3 is to suggest 3 reasons that could account for the pattern shown in the number of dengue cases in Caribbean island X. And if you look at the number of cases, you realize that the number of cases decrease over time. All right, so that is very important for you to note. All right, and so what could really cause this as a general concept is increased awareness and preventative actions or measures. All right, and so I list some of the options here or answers. And one is that all containers that can store water are removed from around houses, so people can be aware and start removing those things. You can have also an increase in mosquito fogging. Those trucks or cars or vans, really, that drive around communities and will spray for mosquito. So they spray the insecticides that will kill the mosquito. All right. There also could be an increased use of repellent. So persons becoming aware again and buying repellent and make sure they are free from mosquito bites. All right. And also we can have properly sealed windows and doors to prevent entry of mosquitoes in the household. All right. So anything that is suitable, they will accept once it will prevent you from getting bite or prevent the reproduction of mosquitoes. All right. Or even to kill the mosquitoes. All right. So last part of this question is to state 2 similarities between malaria and dengue. And both of them are transmitted through mosquito bites. All right, and so mosquito will be the vector for both malaria and dengue. And of course, they both result in fever, even though the level of fever may be different in both of them, but they do result in fever. All right, and so you may also experience some pain as well as headaches. All right, so very important. I mean, they are caused from different things because one is a fever, one is a protozoa. So one is viral, all right. So one is viral and one is a protozoan. So that will be a difference right there. All right, so for question number 2 is to define the term excretion. And excretion here for 2 marks, it is a homeostasis process that removes metabolic waste from the body. So for 2 marks, please do not just say that it is removal of waste from the body. You need to specify what type of waste, metabolic waste, and I just include that it is a homeostasis process. All right, so for part B of this question is the figure 2 shows a diagram of structures of the excretory system, and I already go ahead and label. So here we have a renal vein, and there's only one reason that I could use to tell that is a renal vein. I'm going to show you that below the diagram. Normally, for you to identify a vein and an artery, you have arrows. All right, of course, the vein will be going away from the kidneys, and going into the kidneys will be the renal artery. All right, but again, there's no arrow here to indicate that this is a vein, but there's something mentioned below this diagram that indicates it's a vein. All right, and so we have here B is the pyramid. C, we have the cortex. All right, they didn't ask us for this, but this is the ureter coming from the kidney. And then the ureter will go into the urinary bladder, which is D. And then E will be the urethra, and that is used to expel the urine from the body. All right, so figure 2 is the structures of the excretory system. And so they ask us here to match each function below with its appropriate structure by writing the letters A, B, C, or D in the spaces provided. And so please note that there are more structures given than there are functions. And so for part 1 here, or option 1, it said the structure that carries blood away from the kidney. And this is my clue. It's a carry blood away from the kidney. And so it has to be A. That's the only blood vessel that is labeled. And so we know that if it's carrying blood away from the kidney, it must be a renal vein. And that's the only clue I have to say renal vein. Otherwise, you have to use arrows. All right, for 2, it said the structure that houses the Boseman capsule, and that will definitely be the cortex. All right, like loop of Henle and so on would be in the medulla. All right, but the Boseman capsule is in the cortex, and so please you need to know the parts of a nephron. All right, that's very important as well. And for part three, so the structures through which urine leaves the body, and that is the urethra, which is labeled as E. All right, and then it's the structure that stores urine, and that's the urinary bladder, which is D. All right, and so let's go to the next part of the question, and this is part C of this question. And so it reads that Reba is 50 pounds overweight. Oh Lord. Her doctor tells her that she has developed diabetes mellitus. And for part one of this, is to predict three effects Reba may experience if she leaves her diabetes unmanaged. And so she may experience a number of these things: frequent tiredness. She may experience frequent urination, blurred vision, frequent thirst, numbness, or tingling in her hands and feet. All right, so those are some of the basic symptoms for diabetes. All right, and of course, if she do test, you will see urine glucose in the urine. All right, and so notice I put test in red because she's not experiencing glucose in the urine. She's not going to notice it. All right, but these are the things that in blue that she will experience directly. But this will have to be done by a test. All right, the number of glucose or the amount of glucose in the urine, or if glucose is in the urine. All right, so part two of this question is to state three recommendations which Reba's doctor may suggest to help her manage her diabetes. And so one is to exercise more, two is to consume less starchy food, and three is to do regular checks or monitoring of blood glucose levels, and also in some cases may take insulin medication. All right, and what is very important here is that the doctor may also advise about weight loss. All right, and that is only if she's overweight, so definitely this will apply to her. But not all cases, doctor will recommend to do weight loss programs. All right, only if really the person is overweight. All right, and of course, healthy dieting is important, and that is really consuming less starchy food as well. You consume more vegetables and so on, fruits and things like that. All right, less sugary stuff. All right. Now for part three, so Reba's husband Mike is a high-powered lawyer who is also overweight and smokes for relaxation. I suggest one disease that Mike could be at risk for developing and give two symptoms of this disease. All right, and so I kind of separate it into two sections because it's doing two things. One is overweight, which is a bad thing, and two is a smoker as well, which is another bad thing. So you have double trouble. So what I did is to separate the different conditions, and they asked for one. And so you can talk about hypertension, you can talk about bronchitis, you can talk about cardiovascular diseases, and you can talk about emphysema. All right, and so if you write hypertension, then dizziness, headaches are common symptoms for that. Cardiovascular disease, you may have chest pain, weakness, or fatigue most times. Bronchitis is frequent coughing and also shortness of breath. Emphysema is just like bronchitis. However, the difference between emphysema and bronchitis is that emphysema, you may have shortness of breath as well, but the difference is really when you cough, you get mucus in the cough. All right, and the difference, truthfully, is that bronchitis affects the bronchi, while emphysema affects the alveoli, and that's a big difference between them. All right, and that is just in case you need it to know the differences, really. All right, so that's question is out. Now, question number three is that the nervous system together with the endocrine system regulates all of the activities of the human body. It consists of two major divisions, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. It's a name the two main components of a central nervous system, and of course, we all know that is brain and the spinal cord. All right, that's an easy 2 marks right there. For part two of this question, it said name the main component of the peripheral nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system is made up of all other nerves, which are the spinal nerve and the cranial nerve. So generally speaking, the main component of all those nerves, we call them neurons. So we say you may have neurons or nerve cells. Those are the major components. Again, there are two categories: spinal nerves and cranial nerves. All right, so part B is the table below shows 4 functions of different parts of the brain. And just to make a mention right here, it said A controls heart rate and blood pressure. That's the medulla oblongata. I put this here for a reason because the others will be accounted for. Secretes hormone that control growth and metabolism. And so let me just show you right here. And so this is the matchup right here. Pituitary gland will be the one that is used to control growth and metabolism. All right, because it's called the master gland and it controls all other glands. All right, and it's a control conscious thought, memory, and learning, and that will be our cerebrum. All right, that's the largest part of the brain and controls balance and posture and movement. That is the cerebellum. All right, and so let's go to the next part of the question. Notice part C. So during a human and social biology class, a teacher explained the difference between voluntary and involuntary actions. It said name one voluntary action and explain how the action occurs. And there are so many you can list. One of the easiest one is walking. And the truth is, all of that what I explained here can be applied to any voluntary action that you may list. And voluntary actions are those that you have to think about. All right. Involuntary actions, you do not think about them. All right. And they just occur based upon the functioning of the medulla oblongata. But the cerebrum is used for conscious thought and voluntary actions. All right. And so the first thing happening here is that impulses from the brain are sent towards the spinal cord. And that's one of the major events that happen in terms of voluntary action, because again, you're thinking about doing it. You're thinking about walking, talking, singing, all of those things. All right, dancing. So impulses then travel through the motor neuron, all right, and that is coming from the spinal cord, and then impulses are then sent to the effector cells in the muscles, and then the muscles are then stimulated, and the action of walking takes place by a series of contractions and relaxations of the muscles. All right, and so that's what takes place there. For 4 marks, that's easy thing. Name it is 1 mark, and then 3 points to explain how it passes through all the different neurons to the muscle to carry the action. That's your 3 marks right there. All right, so part D is that identify 2 drugs which act as stimulants and 1 drug which acts as a depressant. And I cannot give you more than 1 here. Stimulant could be things like caffeine, nicotine, and cocaine. Those are things that keep you alert. All right, and of course, depressant will kind of slow down your movement and actions. And we have alcohol right here, and we have tranquilizers. Example here is Valium. All right, and so part E, which is the last part of this question, is the differentiate between physical drug dependence and psychological drug dependence. And so just to quickly run through this, and I want to pay attention to the words here. I missed off an E right here, so just make a note, that's dependence. So physical dependence affects the functioning of the structures of organ of the body, such as heartbeat. So notice the word physical. So affect the physical organs, the physical structures. So your heartbeat, your breathing, those things may be affected by the drugs. So if you're not having the drug, then your heartbeat may be slower or faster, depending on the condition that you have. All right, your breathing may be affected, things like that. You may sweat, so if you're not having the drug, then you may have some symptoms that may not be favorable. All right, and of course, while psychological dependence affects the emotional state or motivation of the person. So you depend on the drug to be happy, and you depend on the drug to be motivated to do things. And if you don't get the drugs, you feel depressed and things like that. So that will be psychological dependency. All right. That end that question. We're going on to the next question, and there's a big gap there, but nothing is missing. So question number 4 is Conrad and his sister April are fraternal twins, which means that they don't look alike, really. They may look similar in some ways, but they're not identical. All right, and a point to note with identical twins and fraternal twins. Now, fraternal twins can be same sex or different. However, identical twins must be the same sex or gender. Must. Okay? All right, and so part 1 here, option 1, is to state the genotype that determines the gender of Conrad and the gender of April. And so genotype of Conrad, since he's a boy, we have X and Y. All right. And genotype for April, since she's a girl, she is XX. And then for part 2, say identify the chromosome that makes Conrad male and the chromosome that makes April female. And of course, at this point, you'd realize that from our chromosome, we are gender-based. That determines our gender already. And so male chromosome is definitely Y. So you must have a Y to be a male. And if you're a female, you can only have what? X chromosome. All right? And so for part B, is a figure 3 shows a karyotype of an individual with a genetic disorder that occurs on chromosome 21. And so the karyotype actually shows the outline or display of all the chromosome of that organism in terms of their size and also their shape. So they group them in terms of size and shape. All right, and so notice chromosome 21 here, and a chromosome again occurs in pair. Chromosomes occur in pairs, just to make a note there. And for human beings, we have 23 pairs or 46 chromosomes. So notice chromosome 21, we have an extra chromosome, and we should know what that is. I point to note again that this person will be a female. Why? Because we have 2 X chromosome and there's no Y chromosome. Again, chromosomes are grouped together based upon size and also their shape. All right, so for part 1 here, it's a name the disorder that this individual may have, and this one, again, because of extra chromosome, it is Down syndrome. Now, for part 2 of this question, is to state which parent or parents passes on the chromosome that determines the sex of this individual. And it doesn't matter what individual is or what gender the individual is, but the father always determines the gender of the child. And the reason for that, because the mother can only give X chromosome. So therefore, there's always 100% possibility that a child will get an X chromosome from the mother. But to determine the gender now is determined based upon if the father's sperm is X chromosome or if the father's sperm is Y chromosome. So depending on what the father contributes to the fusion of the gametes, then that determines the gender of the offspring or child. All right, so the father is the one. However, part 3 is to state whether or not this disease can be inherited. And of course, Down syndrome is not inherited, cannot be inherited. All right. And although in some family there are certain things that may increase the possibility of it, but it's not an inherited condition. Let me not even call it disease, but a condition. All right. Is a definite term degenerative disease, and a degenerative disease is a disease that gets progressively worse over time, and it results in the continuous destruction of the affected structure or organ. So keep on getting worse. All right, so that's what it is. All right, and so let's go to part D. Is that hemophilia and sickle cell anemia are both genetic disorders. Is a state 2 similarities and 2 differences between these diseases. And so the similarities between hemophilia and anemia, just to make a mention right here. And a matter of fact, there are 2 things I need to mention. One is what they are. And so the first thing is that hemophilia is when you're unable to clot the blood, especially get a cut. All right, so you lack a special protein that will kind of trigger or stimulate the blood to clot. All right, we call it a blood clotting factor. So it's a special protein. And then for sickle cell anemia, no, that is the abnormal red blood cell. And please, there's a difference between sickle cell anemia and anemia, because you have anemia, which is just the lack of hemoglobin due to the lack of iron. All right, so that's different. Do not mix them up. All right, so the similarities between both is that they are disorders of the blood or simple disorders of the blood cells. All right, and 2, they are controlled by recessive alleles. And a third one here is that although hemophilia is a sex link, both diseases can affect both genders. And just to make a note of that. All right. And so the reason why they can affect both gender, because really and truly hemophilia is really X-linked, which can be both male and female, because both male and female, they have X chromosome. All right. And so here now the differences And notice I put it in a chart to make it easier. And you can also do that in examination. You don't have to write no long sentences once the points are clear. And if you're making a chart, make sure you compare the same thing at a time. So, for example, hemophilia in 1, it is a sex link. Specifically, it's X link. And while sickle cell anemia is autosomal link. And autosomal means it can affect the chromosomes, which is not the sex chromosomes, which is not the 23rd pair. All right, so from 1 to 2022. All right, just to make a note there. All right, but there's a specific one that it will affect anyhow. All right, and so the next one here is that for hemophilia, it affects the platelets, eventually affects the platelets in the ability to clot blood. And while sickle cell anemia now affects the red blood cell. All right, so there are two different blood cells that are affected by the conditions. All right, and the third one we have here is that a single allele can produce the effect in males. Just to make a note, in males, right, you can only have one chromosome or one allele that causes that. And the reason for that is because it's X. Males only have one X chromosome. So therefore, if that X chromosome is affected, then the male will show that symptom. All right? And so for sickle cell anemia, it needs two recessive alleles to produce the effect. All right? And as I was mentioning in part 3 here, or the third option, and a point to note is opposing this point is that if you're females, however, then you need two alleles, which is the 2X, all right? Because it is recessive, all right? So again, recessive traits can only show when it is in the homozygous form. That means you must have two recessive alleles to see the condition if it's a recessive disease. And this is part B, which is the last section. Section B, which is the last part. And again, answer all the questions in this section. And for number 5, it said, due to the worldwide prevalence of diseases, health and health-related issues have become a major concern. Personal hygiene is extremely important to one's overall good health, and when neglected, certain infections can develop. And I agree with this statement 1,000,000%. Good hygiene is very important, extremely important. All right, and so here it asks us to define the term good health, not just health, but good health. And so for 4 marks, I was a little bit concerned why 4 marks, but what I did is just kind of expound on the statement, because a good health is really a state of complete, keyword, complete, not just a state of, but a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And to expound on this, he said this means a person is free of diseases, infections, and injuries. And this is speaking to the physical aspect or the biological aspect, right? And additionally, the person is in a good state of mind and also happy. And this is a mental thing. Also, the person is able to develop good social relationships and is able to maintain good relationships in society. So that will kind of account for your 4 marks. And so it's very important for a person to be like this. This is the ideal person. This is a person you want to be around, right? A person that is physically well, mentally stable, and of course have good social skills. That determines if a person is healthy. So if you have bad ways, something is wrong. That means you're not totally healthy. You may be healthy biologically or physically, but mentally you are sick. All right, anyhow, be of good health. All right, part 2 is a name to infections that could develop as a result of improper personal hygiene, and there are many, even more than what I list here. Tooth decay for one, if you don't brush your teeth, oh my God. Yeast infection, females, you need to wash properly. Be careful of the things that you wear, even where you sit, things like that. Urinary tract infections. You may develop that again, most often in females, but of course can happen in males as well. Athlete's foot, washing the foot and keep them dry as best as you possibly can. Wash your feet, wash your feet as often as you possibly can and keep them dry. If you have sweaty feet, then you wear special type of socks to absorb the moisture. Food poisoning, when you're cooking, please wash up properly, wash your hands and all those things. You can have gastroenteritis, which is kind of similar to or related to how you treat your food, similar to food poisoning. Hepatitis A, you may have ringworms, and you have many others that you may develop as well. All right. And so let's jump into part B of this now. Part B, you need some special attention here because I cannot do this in a way that is because there's so many options, I cannot do it in a special way. So let's just go through it and see if you could understand. And here I said many pathogens are foodborne, and pathogens are microorganisms that cause diseases, all right, or anything that can cause diseases, all right. And they said they are food borne, which means they're really transferring food, and therefore is extremely important to ensure that food is as free as possible from pathogens. And they said describe two named methods by which pathogens may be removed from foods. And so I put them in different categories, 3 categories really. This is really the cooking method. So cooking is one, just a general thing. So proper cooking, pressure cooking, deep frying, proper reheating. So when you're reheating food, you need to proper reheat it. Not just kind of warm it, but make sure it's properly warmed. All right. And so cooking and all of these, what they do is really to kill the pathogens or microorganisms. All right. And again, most microorganisms cannot survive in high heat, just to make a note of that. And so therefore proper cooking will create unfavorable conditions for pathogens. And so they may die before you actually consume the food. So that's one way to remove. And also in preparation, such as washing food, is particularly meat, with vinegar or lime, because lime is acidic and vinegar is also acidic. So, and of course, some bacteria, they cannot survive in acidic conditions. All right. Of course, we have extremophiles that may survive in harsh conditions, but generally speaking, common bacteria, they really do not survive well in harsh conditions. All right. And of course, washing your hands as well to prevent contamination, washing the counters, utensils, and all those things. So this is in the food preparation part. You may want to remove the pathogen from them by using some harsh washing things of meat, especially washing the vegetables. Very important. So washing is important. Washing the vegetables, because vegetables can also contain pathogens as well, because bacteria can be every and anywhere. Protozoa could be anywhere, so you have to be careful. All right, and of course, these methods prevent contamination for proper washing, and of course, keep the kitchen clean, the dining areas clean as well, and that will prevent the transfer of microbes from food to food. That's very important. And so, washing with lime or vinegar can also kill microbes, and that's a way to remove them. And remember, we're talking about the removal of, right? Not the contamination or transfer, but to remove the things that are there. All right. And so another way here is also in preparation. So proper preparation and packaging is also important. And so in terms of canning is a good way that you can use, because canning depends on canning generally use heat as well. Salting process, you can salt some food, especially meat, and salty condition will also kill bacteria. Drying process will also kill bacteria as well, because they need moisture to survive for the most part. Sanitary production practices is also important. And so normally when you're doing sanitary production practices, you may include disinfection as well. All right, disinfecting the area and all those things. Those things will move microbes. All right, and so again, these methods ensure that pathogens are removed or destroyed before the food products reach the retailer or the consumers. All right, so for part C of this is that antibiotics can be used to treat some infections, but their use has been abused. It's one issue that has arisen as a result of the abuse of antibiotics is drug sensitivity. That means you're sensitive to the drug. All right, you have reaction to it. Similar to allergy. All right. Well, not necessarily allergy, but similar. It's similar to it. All right. And so identify and explain one other issue relating to the overuse of antibiotics, which could make them ineffective. And a very common one here is antibiotic resistant bacteria may be developed. And again, bacteria can mate, or matter of fact, can mutate, I should say right here, can mutate. So bacteria can mutate and then they will reproduce. All right. And so when they mutate and reproduce, then they will produce offspring or bacterial cells that are now also resistant to the antibiotic. All right. And another one here you can have here is a destruction of useful bacteria, especially in our digestive system, because overusing antibiotic may kill the useful bacteria that we need in our digestive tract. And if you kill those bacteria, then maybe easier to get certain intestinal infections or other infections. There's an N missing right here, infection. Just please put that in. If I try to put it in, it's going to disappear. I tried it before. All right, so that infection right there. All right, so last question, and we're out of here. It said, on a field trip, David visited the municipal sewage treatment plant. It said, list 4 stages in the sewage treatment plant process he would have observed. So what are 4 stages that you will observe in any sewage treatment process? Is that one, you have what they call a preliminary treatment, or what we call pre-treatment. All right, and that involves screening and separation, especially of solids or things that should not be in the sewage. All right, and then you have a primary treatment, which includes sedimentation and filtration. And this is pretty much where you're going to remove some solid, right, larger solid particles. And then you're going to have secondary, is an O right here that should be out as well. I don't want to even mess with that. But secondary treatment, and that is where you have the activation of sludge and also decomposition. And this is when you have biological decomposition. That means microbes will be there to help with the decomposition process of the organic materials that are present in sewage. And then the tertiary treatment, we're going to have here disinfection, and disinfection includes things like chlorination and or UV treatment. So this is we're going to kill microorganisms. All right, and also at this point for the tertiary treatment, we're going to remove solid or nutrients from the sewage. All right, and then what we get now is free of microbes, free of solid, free of nutrients, and the end product will be pure to be released in the environment, whether it be in the waterways or whatever it is. All right, and then for part 2 of this question, it said, name 2 unsafe methods of sewage disposal used in the home. And so unsafe is draining sewage into the waterways directly if you live near a river or the ocean. So if you live on the ocean front and you release the sewage in that, that's a bad thing. Dumping directly on the land is also a bad thing. And also dumping on plants or farms directly. So that will be untreated sewage going to your farm on lands or in water directly. All right, and you should also know the effect, just to go back a little bit to this, you should also know the effect of dumping untreated sewage in waterways that will lead to a process called eutrophication, which is excess growth of algae. All right, and of course, excess growth of algae will lead to bacterial growth and also lack of sunlight and destruction of marine organisms, lack of food, lack of oxygen, and the list goes on. All right, part B. Now, Benjamin has a pit latrine that is filled with fecal matter. He said due to slow decomposition, and he said he is thinking of using the contents of the latrine to fertilize his garden. Oh my God. All right. Part 1. He said, advise Benjamin as to whether this is a good idea. State 3 reasons to support your response. This is creepy, to use human feces to fertilize plants. Anyhow, it's not a good idea. Right off the bat, it's not a good idea. I mean, it can be done, to be with all honesty. Scientifically, it can be done, and it's not a bad thing scientifically. But in terms of hygiene, oh my God, this cannot be right. But we understand the science behind it, because truthfully, it's organic material which you can decompose like any organic waste. But on a personal level, nah. All right, and so we're taking it as it's not good idea. All right, again, you can say it's a good idea, and you can support your answer, but I'm going with a bad idea, to be honest with you, because of my personal beliefs. Scientifically, yes, it can be done. So either way, you're good, but you have to make sure that you give good answers. So I'm going to give you a little bit of why it could be a good idea. But for me, personally, nah. All right, anyway, number 1, you can transfer pathogens onto plants and then to people, all right? And of course, microbes that are there can start to reproduce more on plants and so on if the conditions are suitable. And then, of course, you may have increasing pathogens by the time it reaches to persons who are consuming the food. Can you imagine? All right, again, if you have rain or flood, these can cause water to run off or run off water, and that may enter to larger bodies of water, causing disease such as cholera. All right. Again, we can have the fecal matter reaches waterways, and it can cause eutrophication, as I mentioned earlier, and deposit of unhealthy compounds and chemicals such as antibiotics. Remember, different persons using the latrine now. Some of them might be sick, some may not be sick, but all that mixture of different things and medication you take may end up in your plants, and then you consume it, and then it affects you. Oh, Lord of mercy. All right, if you want to choose the good idea part of it, then these are some of the things that you can say. I didn't put them, but yes, these are things that you can say. For example, you may can say add nutrients to the plants, is organic material that will decompose and help with the nitrogen cycle, as a form of recycling, as a form of all of that good stuff. Oh boy, but feces in farms, I will never eat from that farm. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Personally, I'm sorry. All right. Part 2 is I suggest 2 actions Benjamin should take when his pit latrine is filled with fecal matter. If his pit is filled with latrine is filled with fecal matter, then one, he could get it professionally pumped or removed or sucked out or vacuum, whichever you call it. 2, we can disinfect and get it sealed. And 3, he could allow decomposition to occur before he use it again. And decomposition will actually break down the organic material, and so it will lessen over a period of time. It's not a fast process. It takes a little while. But of course, the condition will be suitable for decomposition, so it won't be that long. But the question is, what will you use in the meantime? And so I have a next option right here. You could build a second one and use that and keep on, shifting or rotate which one you'll use as they build up. You choose the next one. But I mean, people moving away from pit latrine because, of course, the unhealthy issues and so on and the exposure. All right, let's go to part C. All right, now Charlotte walks through her sweet potato patch and notices that one vine, only one vine, that's very important, one vine has larger leaves than the other vines. She later discovers that the vine with larger leaves produces very large sweet potatoes. That's one vine. Just bear it in mind. So part 1, it said, name the event that could have caused the difference in the size of the leaves and the sweet potatoes. And so this is mutation. Mutation could cause it. And there's a reason why I was emphasizing one vine, because it's only one occurrence out of all the patches, all the potatoes within the patch. So since it's only one, it has to be some form of mutation, a genetic mutation that is. And then now it says state 2 reasons why the event named in C1 is beneficial. Mutation can be beneficial because 1, it may result in variation or diversity. 2, there may be a possible increase in production because, again, they state here larger leaves and, of course, larger potatoes. And it can also promote better adaptation or survival. So mutation itself is not a bad thing, because mutation is not always result in a negative effect, but also positive effect. In this case, it's positive. Bigger leaves, bigger potato, more production, more money, and all of those things. All right, so this is the end of this review, and I thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and I sure will see you soon. Take care, and thank you very much for supporting as always.